All right. Here we go in three, two, and one. Final regular season weekend of the college football year. It is week 13. It is rivalry week, and we are with you a day early. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone tuning in with us at CS Now Tweets is where you can find us. It's the Schasberger, Trip Hurd, and of course the man, the myth, the legend, the unicorn of all unicorns. It is Phil Steele, author of college football's most comprehensive preview magazine. Phil, we're coming off an incredible week 12. I mean, Texas Christian, TCU, Miami, their playoff hopes on life support. They're able to get a last-second field goal in both instances. It was 9 seconds with Michigan, and then Tennessee gets smoked out of the playoff. South Carolina and Spencer Rattler show up in the largest of ways, and it's rivalry weekend. We've got the game, we've got clean old-fashioned hate. I don't even know if we have time for Georgia Tech at Georgia, but the Iron Bowl and all of these matchups that have certainly implications as it pertains to the college football playoff, and we're balancing it with Thanksgiving, Phil. So how are you going to manage yourself this week? I know you've been doing it for 30 years, your whole entire life. So this is par for the course for you.
That's right. And it's pretty much football-driven weekend completely. So there's not too many games going on Thursday. I only really care about the college football. So there's one game I'm mainly watching on Thursday. And then the rest of the weekend's just football.
Does that come as any shock to you, Trip? Trip, I thought you were going to come in with, like, is the Steele household hosting? Like, what is your favorite dish? Come on, you're the man with those kind of questions, Trip.
Well, I'm not really a Thanksgiving guy, but I am curious to know. I mean, do you have a go-to dish or anything, Phil?
Oh, absolutely. It's my mom's stuffing. So that's all I need. I just need a big plate of my mom's stuffing. I don't care about the turkey or anything else, just my mom's stuffing. And I look forward to it. It's only once a year I get it. So.
And an ice cold Diet Mountain Dew.
That's right.
I heard that's what's in your football mug there every day.
That is, yes.
Same here.
That is excellent. I would kill for your mother's stuffing for sure, Phil, because I'm a big stuffing guy myself. A broccoli dressing, green bean casserole type of guy. Also, so looking forward to it'll be a Friendsgiving sort of thing for me this year. So, and I've got my daughter here in studio, so Thanksgiving has already kind of begun. So We'll see if she's got a pick to give before we get out of here. I know one thing that'll be on your dinner table, though, Phil, and that'll be a golden egg. So let's get right into it. The one game on Thursday night, it is the Egg Bowl. It's the 119th edition. I think it's the 30th, 31st time that they're playing on Thanksgiving. 95th time for what they call the Golden Egg. Ole Miss leads all time 64, 46, and 6, but 15 and 15, the Bulldogs and Rebels over the last 30 years. Ole Miss is given 2.5, 58 is the total. 7 o'clock game, ESPN on Thursday night. Phil, a lot of distractions, maybe. I totally whiffed on Ole Miss, minus 2.5 at Arkansas. Did not factor in the Auburn distraction, potentially, but Lane Kiffin seemingly has his troops focused heading into Thursday night. We'll see. Bulldogs and Rebels, it always tends to get weird.
Yeah, it does. We've seen some very weird things here, including the end zone thing that happened a couple of years ago. But this game here, I think Ole Miss matches up well. Alabama beat them twice. There was definitely a hangover from that game last week against Arkansas, but they still put up 703 yards. Granted, a lot of it in the second half. But they can run the football with both Judkins and Evans. And if you look at Mississippi State this year, in SEC play, they're giving up 4.8 yards per carry, 184 yards per game on the ground. So I think Ole Miss will be able to run the football on Mississippi State. They're at home, and I think they're the stronger team. So I'm surprised the line's under 3 in this one. I do like Ole Miss minus the points, and I don't think there will be the distractions they had last week.
All right, moving on to Friday, high noon kick with Baylor. What's got to be kind of a deflated Baylor team. Going to Austin to take on Texas. The spread right now looks like Texas by 8.5, the total at 55.5. Both these teams are 7-4 against the spread this season. But Baylor, I mean, they had the ball up 8 a couple of times in that fourth quarter last week and just couldn't get it done. Like every other team that's played TCU this year, they just couldn't get it done. But Texas, on the other hand, very impressive win at Kansas, 55-14. You got to think they're the more confident team coming into this week, Phil.
Yeah, they are. And I like Texas to win the game, but I don't know about covering the 8.5 because Dave Aranda's defense is really good. And they're coming off a game where, I mean, they held TCU to 442 yards last week. As you mentioned, they were up by 8. Really had a chance to win that game, and it's their final game of the regular season. What we've seen from Texas is they generally get out to some good-sized leads, with the exception of last week. They generally let the opponent back in it. So I think Baylor and Texas are fairly close talent-wise. I like Texas to win the game, but I'll take Baylor plus the 8.5 to keep it closer than expected.
Texas needs a win and a Kansas State loss to reach the Big 12 title game, which would come up against TCU. They're trying to preserve perfection in the regular season. They'll have Iowa State at home. More on that game coming up later on. Those two have split their last 12. Also, Baylor 6-0 against the spread in Big 12 finales over their last six-pack of games. Reminder, too, Phil Steele Plus. Get more information at philsteele.com. Follow Phil on Twitter at philsteele042. He'll have a YouTube tutorial that comes out Friday morning on how to use Phil Steele Plus. Right, Phil? Or is that going to be Thursday this week? Still on Friday morning?
I'm gonna put it out on Thursday this week, so it'll be up on Thanksgiving morning. That way, if you got nothing to do on Thanksgiving, you got a little extra time, you can check out the Phil Steele Plus tour. 8-3 last week for the Phil Steele Plus tour.
Good stuff. And of course, interact with us at CS Now Tweets. We will give out a free Phil Steele subscription valued at $99 for the next football season. So interact with us. Continue to do so. Huge game in the American, Phil. Tulane at Cincinnati, 12 o'clock on Friday. A lot of games on Friday. Just an incredible weekend here to conclude the regular season. The Bearcats, 47 is the total, 12 o'clock. Now, the winner of this one, Phil, my understanding, is going to host the American Athletic title game. Houston and UCF are on the outside looking in potentially to get into this game. This could end up being a rematch a week from now, but Tulane and Cincinnati, what do you see? Because it's Green Wave defense. Will it travel into the weather perhaps in that part of the country at Nippert this weekend?
Yeah, that's a big question, because I think when you take a look at the two teams this year, I haven't been blown away with Cincinnati. They've had a lot of close wins, not overwhelming against the spread this year. And Tulane, on the other hand, has been covering a good amount of games. So they've been more spread friendly. They've got a really good defense. But the factor that probably lies in here for me with Cincinnati is the fact they've been here, done that. This is yet another championship game at home. The good thing for Tulane is the temperature in Ohio, I would assume on Friday, should be upper 40s, lower 50s. So it's not going to be freezing. It's not going to be horrible temperatures for them. So the temperature will be okay. But like I said, Cincinnati's got that great win streak at home. They've been in a lot of big games. Meanwhile, Tulane is playing in their first big game like this. So I like Cincinnati as a slight favorite at home. And once again, I think they're laying less than 3 points here.
Yeah, high of 53 on Friday. -2 is the line currently. So the Green Wave are catching 2. Cincinnati has won 4 straight in the series, 3-1 against the spread. All right, Tripp, what do you got? Battle line rivalry, Arkansas and Missouri. 3.5. Hogs are favored by on the road in Como, 3:30 start.
Yeah, and the Hogs, I mean, you could tell they really missed KJ Jefferson. He comes back last week, 17 of 22, 3 touchdowns, no picks versus Ole Miss. While the Missouri offense, it's been a little hard to watch. We know they've got a good defense, but that offense leaves a lot to be desired. You take away their game against Abilene, the game against New Mexico State, I think their highest total all year was 24. So there is one note here. Arkansas, no Bumper Pool. It looks like they're going to shut him down for the rest of the season from what I've read. So I don't know if that's enough to really give you any kind of lean on this game, Phil, but it kind of looks like Arkansas to me.
Yeah, I like Arkansas to go get the win. Now, I will say this. The thing about Missouri, they're completely focused on this game. Last week, they actually ran senior day so that there were no distractions for this game. They know they need to get a win to get to a bowl game. They were stuck on 5 wins. They got a heck of a defense. Their defense this year holding opponents to 67 yards per game, below their season average, number 25 in the country. Arkansas, meanwhile, giving opponents 43 above. But you hit right on it, Tripp. Offensively, big edge to Arkansas. And with KJ Jefferson back, you got to think they'll be able to go in and get a win. I think it's going to be a highly competitive game. So, 3.5 seems to be about the right number on this one. But I like Arkansas to win the game straight up.
Still have a handful of games or so on Friday, Phil. Missouri 9-4 too in that series all time. I thought was interesting. They have never lost to Arkansas in Como. NC State and North Carolina. Tar Heels really disappointed last week against Georgia Tech, blowing a 17-point lead, taking themselves out of any outside potential of reaching the college football playoff. They only had 97 yards in the last 33 plays against the Yellow Jackets. They're getting the rival Wolfpack at home, who are 3-3 since the Clemson loss. So much hype coming into the year. I know they're really banged up, but as is every team this time of the year, right, Phil? It's a war of attrition. And when you have depth, when you have 4 and 5 stars still on the second line, that's why you tend to rise to the top here come the regular season finale, and we're on the cusp of college football playoff time. You really get to separate those guys. But Wolfpack are catching 6.5. 56 is the total, 3:30 game on ABC. I'm expecting a big bounce back from Drake May and the Tar Heels offense, especially after they lost the last 2 to the Wolfpack the previous 2 years.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think when you take a look at North Carolina last week, they were a big favorite coming in. They got a 80-yard touchdown the first play of the game, jump out to a 17-0 lead, and you could just feel they're probably like, you know what, we got this thing. This is going to be easy. And Georgia Tech just didn't stop playing. That's not going to happen here because if you remember last year, North Carolina sort of had the game wrapped up, and then NC State stole it from them at the end. I think with Drake May at quarterback, they've got a large edge there. Even if MJ Morris returns for NC State, he missed last week. They went with both Jack Chambers and Ben Finley. They're down to their third, fourth-string quarterback, perhaps, or Morris could be back. But no doubt defensively, NC State has the edge, but offensively, massive edge to North Carolina. Home edge, revenge edge, and coming off a loss like that, even with the ACC title game on deck, I like North Carolina minus the points in this one.
Well, I think we're going to see more points in Chapel Hill than we do in Kinnick Stadium on Friday. We've got Nebraska on the road at Iowa right now. Iowa's favored by 10.5. The total up to 37.5, which is a little bit higher than we've seen the last couple of weeks with those guys. But 4 o'clock kick time. I know it looks like Nebraska is still playing hard for Mickey Joseph right now. Iowa's got that great defense. They're 1 win away from a Big Ten championship game. But look, they've combined for 7 unders in a row. We've talked about playing the streak. I don't think I'm going to stop here. What do you think, Phil?
Yeah, and the only concern I have here would be Iowa's offense, believe it or not, Tripp, because if you take a look at who Iowa has played, they played Iowa State, which is number 1 in the country in holding opponents below their season average. They played Rutgers, just on the cusp of a top 25 defense. They played Michigan, a top 15 defense. They played Illinois, a top 15 defense. They played Ohio State, a top 15 defense. They played Northwestern, which ranks down in the 70s and 80s. They put up 33 points, 393 yards. They played Purdue, which ranks down in the 70s and 80s of the defense. They put up 376 yards, 24 points. Then they went back to playing 2 tough defenses. Now they're playing Nebraska. Once again, a defense that ranks in the 70s and 80s. So I think Iowa will be able to score here. Now, on the flip side of the coin, Nebraska only had 12 first downs, 171 yards last week. The last 4 weeks, they're averaging 208 yards per game. Iowa's defense is holding opponents to 102 yards below their season average. So if they hold them to 102 below their 208, that's only 106 yards for Nebraska. I like Iowa minus the points in this one. And I could see your under coming in because I don't see Nebraska scoring a lot. And Iowa will probably put it away if they get to 24 or 27, Tripp.
Black Friday win at Nebraska would put the Hawkeyes in their 3rd Big Ten title game since 2015. A loss and a Purdue win over Indiana. Then the Boilermakers will represent the Big Ten West coming up a week from Saturday. Territorial Cup. This is one of those rivalries, Phil, where I feel like there's a couple of different nicknames as you read up and you educate yourself on some of these. I've seen the Duel in the Desert among some others. It's Arizona State and Arizona. The Sun Devils are catching 4 in Tucson. 65 is the total, as these two will hook up at 4:30 on Fox on Friday. Sun Devils have won 5 straight in the series. The Cats, that's where I'm leaning. I feel like they're the better team. I think they can cover that 4. How do you handicap the Sun Devils and the Wildcats? Is it something that catches your eye at all?
Yeah, I think the thing that catches my eye would probably be the over in this one. And basically Arizona's defense, which has played better. I mean, they've only allowed 28 and 31 points the last 2 weeks. That's remarkable for Arizona's defense. They're giving up 5.7 yards per carry. They're giving up 69% completions on the air. And I think Xavier Valadale will have a big day running the football for Arizona State. Whether it's Bourget, whether it's Emory Jones, I look for Arizona State's quarterbacks to have success. And on the flip side of the coin, Arizona can score on pretty much anybody in the country. Jaden Allure is having an excellent year. He's got Dorian Singer, Jacob Cowing, Tatori McMillan, dangerous receiving core. They're going to be throwing the football around the yard. Nothing to lose. Neither team's going to a bowl game this year. So let everything go. Play your trick plays. This is like a bowl game. And as we know, a lot of the early bowl games tend to go over. So I think you've got a pure over team in Arizona, an Arizona State team that can score. And I like the over is probably my favorite play here.
How about the second longest non-interrupted rivalry in college sports? UCLA visiting Cal. I've seen this one coined as the Bear Bowl in your magazine, Phil. So, by the way, if you haven't done it, you're not out of luck. Just do it because, hey, you owe it to Phil at this point. But otherwise, get a jump start for next year. College football's ultimate preview magazine. Of course, Phil Steele, the author there. But UCLA is given 10. 60.5 is the total. 4:30 start between these two. The Bruins have won 7 of 9 in this rivalry, but I'm worried about DTR. I'm worried about his health. 4 touchdowns through 3 or 4 interceptions last week in that shootout over USC, which they lost by 3, 48-45. That was like a couple of drunk guys in the bar, Phil, just swinging at each other late at night. That was terrific entertainment. Of course, USC not even controlling their own destiny, still behind LSU in the playoff rankings. I don't know how that's possible. But how do you see UCLA and Cal shaping up on Friday?
Yeah, UCLA is clearly the better team. If you put this thing on a neutral field, Kyle, and played it 3 weeks ago, I would take UCLA by 21 in a heartbeat. But they are in a massive letdown spot. Not only are they coming off a loss to USC, they're coming off with basically their Rose Bowl hopes gone. I mean, I believe they have a slim hope, a mathematical hope, but basically I think their hopes of getting to the Pac-12 championship game are gone. They figured being a little bit of a letdown mo. And Cal is a great dog. I mean, that's the thing under Justin Wilcox. They tend to cover as a dog and then not do well as a favorite. They got a miracle cover last week against Stanford. They trailed that thing 20-9 or something like that in the fourth quarter and ended up winning 27-20, a couple big fumble returns. I think UCLA is a better team, but the situation says take Cal plus the 10 in this one. I like UCLA to win the game, but closer than the spread.
Cal won in a wild way, too, in that fourth quarter, 21 points against Stanford in the big game. They were able to knock off their rivals. So Stanford getting a 61-yard field goal that didn't even impact the outcome of the game, but I think it did help the total go over there in the final seconds last weekend. Tripp, your seminal moment time. I was looking at FSU's record. They start 4-0. They go 0-3. They've been 4-0 since. Yet I'm sure Phil still has them near the top in terms of his power rankings.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, they've only played, maybe 3 bad quarters of football all year. And unfortunately, that cost them that chunk of games in the middle of the season. What do they check in at now, Phil?
Number 8 in my average game grade, 114.9 they're playing at.
Well, look, I like the line here. I think 9.5 is good enough line to get money on both sides of it. Some people are going to like Anthony Richardson and Florida in a rivalry game, getting close to double digits. I, for one, think Florida State can cover this number. But Florida's coming off the Vandy loss. I do have a stat for you here on Florida State. Their last 4 games, they've outscored their opponents 173-39. Now, they haven't played great teams, but still, that's pretty impressive. Florida State wins this one, and they go on to win a bowl game. That's 10 wins this year.
Yeah, they can definitely get there, no doubt about it. And I think they do win this game because I feel they're the stronger team. And when you look at it, Tripp, right here where you got the last 4 weeks, their average win is by 43-10, and they're outgaining opponents by 263 yards per game, playing to 124.4 level. So they clearly are playing among the best football in the country right now. Now, the thing I want to point out about Florida last week against Vanderbilt, a couple of plays helped out Vanderbilt a lot. Florida had a 445 to 283 yard edge. The punt return, frankly, I mean, rule 101 in punt returns is put your heels on the 10-yard line. If it's going over your head, let it go. Why would you try to field a punt over your shoulder at the 5-yard line? Not really sure, but it basically gave Vanderbilt a touchdown and put him in that game. The thing about Napier, he's not a great favorite, but he is a great dog. He's 15-3 against the spread as a dog. I think it's a rivalry game. I do think Florida State wins the game, but I'm taking the 9.5 in this one with Florida. Just because Napier is such a great dog. And I think Florida, better than what they showed last week, probably should have beaten Vanderbilt, had numerous plays go against them in that one. So I'm going to take Florida plus the points.
Gators have won 3 straight in the series, first in Tallahassee since 2018 because of the COVID influx of scheduling. You just got a glimpse at Phil Steele Plus. Again, more information at philsteele.com. If you're watching live with us at CS Now Tweets, continue to interact with us. One lucky listener and viewer will get a free subscription valued at $99 for next football season. If you're listening on Thursday, again, happy Thanksgiving. For the OG audio listeners or watching the video afterwards, we do appreciate you each and every year. Just one more of these coming up next week back at our normal spot, Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. Phil Steele Plus, so updated for all 131 teams after every game. You get the team pages, you get the average game grades, all the stats, all the advanced data right there. Be like Phil, bet smarter, not harder. One more game on Friday that I want to get to, Phil. Fresno State giving 15 to Wyoming, who is visiting. 50.5 is the total. 10 o'clock is the start here. Fresno is already in the Mountain West Conference title game. They're 5-1 straight up and against the spread in the Mountain West against Wyoming all time. And 5 of 6 games between these two have been decided by at least 17 points. So that might indicate that Fresno is the smart pick here, taking the 15 and laying it.
Yeah, but generally what I look at is when a team's got that conference championship game coming up, I usually like to maybe think that they're looking ahead a little. If they get a bigger lead in this game, maybe take Jake Haener out. We know how valuable he is to that Fresno offense. Go back to earlier in the year, they lost him against USC, and then they lost to Connecticut, lost to Boise, and then it took them about 5 games to get their ground under Fife. Haener's back and healthy. Winning the Mountain West title would be huge against Boise next week. And Wyoming's been a really scrappy team. And I got to tell you, one of the better coaching jobs in the country this year is by Craig Bohl of Wyoming. He lost so much to the transfer portal. Where you're looking at the team in the spring or after spring is over, he was still losing players. You're like, how is this team even going to be competitive? And here's Wyoming at 7-4 this year. Granted, done a little bit with smoke and mirrors. I mean, they're minus 8 yards per game. But they're going to come to play every time Craig Bohl puts a team on the field. So I'm leaning a little bit with Wyoming plus the points just for the fact Fresno's got a huge look ahead to Boise next week.
The build-up is monstrous, as big, I feel like, as it's ever been. Maybe going back to, what was it, the 06 game for Michigan and Ohio State. Third-ranked Wolverines playing in the horseshoe over second-ranked Ohio State. And the Buckeyes, the line is a little rich, 7.5. Buckeyes are favored by 56 is the total. Phil, I think if this game is close, both are going to get in the college football playoff, assuming, of course, they take care of business against the Big Ten West opponent in Indianapolis. Ohio State has won 15 of 17 against the team up north. Michigan, though, their last win in Columbus, 2000, 3-6 against the spread, too, over the last 9 in what they call the game. This is just a monster showdown Saturday.
Yeah, undefeated teams and pretty much right where I thought they would be coming into the year. Both had the schedule to go 11-0 and be here undefeated. And really, when you look at these two teams statistically, there's not that much of a difference. I thought Vegas would set the line at 7. They're basically trying to get you to bet Michigan right now at 7.5, 8. And that has me thinking a little bit about Ohio State. And go back to last year's game. Last year's game was played in the cold. It was played in some tough conditions. And Michigan, that's where they want this game. They want the game in a phone booth because they can out-physical Ohio State at the line, even though Ohio State is more physical than last year, much better defense than last year. And they went out of their way to show how physical they were in some of the games. You still give Michigan an edge at the line of scrimmage if it's played in a phone booth. But if it's not played in a phone booth, and I believe it's going to be about 50 degrees for game time, might have a slight chance of rain, but I think it'll be just fine for the weather. Then I think Ohio State's more explosive on offense with Marvin Harrison, Amika, Julia Fleming. They've got the receiving core. They've, of course, got C.J. Stroud, the proven quarterback, a 35-4 ratio, whereas J.J. McCarthy, they've sort of kept him under some reins, not letting him throw down the field a lot. And Ohio State's playing with some legitimate revenge. I mean, Michigan handed it to them, took them behind the woodshed last year and whooped them. You betcha this was the focal point of the entire season for Ohio State, was getting revenge in this game. So even though the spread's a little rich, like you correctly pointed out, I'm going to go with Ohio State minus the points. Not one of my top plays. I think it's going to be a great game to watch, but I'm going to go with Ohio State minus the points in that one.
Just one more note, too, Phil. I feel like all offseason, given the result of last year, Michigan's going to run the football. That's what they do. J.J. McCarthy hasn't really done much through the air. Maybe he hasn't had to, and that's because of Jim Harbaugh more than anything. But the one thing that they did that they have on the Ohio State bench that Michigan doesn't have, that's Jim Knowles in terms of shutting down that Michigan running game. So this is why Ohio State, this is why Ryan Day went out and made that hire and got Knowles, was for this moment. Makes me think Ohio State more than anything. So it's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out Saturday at noon. The game, Michigan and Ohio State, you can see it on Fox.
But doesn't it just make you kind of want to pull for Michigan, as much as we've heard Stephen Hartzell bash those guys all year long? I would love to see them go in there and pull the upset, but I don't know. All signs do kind of point towards Ohio State in that one. We've got another noon kick between South Carolina and Clemson. The Tigers laying 14.5 right now. The total at 51.5. South Carolina just stuns everybody last week with their win over Tennessee, a Tennessee team that was right on the outside, knocking on the door of the college football playoff. They had to win that game, and South Carolina just blows their door off. Clemson, they take care of business against Miami, but you have to think Clemson this week again has more to play for. Is that line just too big to cover, or do you think Clemson can take care of business?
Well, I had the score right on with the Tennessee-South Carolina game last week. I had about 63-38. Unfortunately, I had Tennessee winning the game by that score. So I was, that shocked the heck out of me last week that South Carolina could do that, especially when you look back at what South Carolina's offense had done. I mean, Rattler had thrown 8 touchdown passes all season. He has 6 against Tennessee. They had 6 points against Florida, 237 yards. They had 10 points against Missouri, 203 yards. They had 286 yards against A&M, barely getting to 13, 14 first downs. They go put up 35 first downs, basically what they had in those 3 games combined in one game, and it was against the top 5 team in the country. Just absolutely shocking. I cannot see South Carolina duplicating that this week. I've seen their offense struggle. And the thing with Clemson is I had them rated my number 1 defensive line in the magazine coming into the season. They were dominated at the line of scrimmage by Notre Dame. But since then, they've played like the number 1 defensive line. I mean, Miami had, 7 yards in the first half last week. They slowed down that Louisville offense and really won that game more comfortably than the final score would indicate. So I think their defense is playing well. They shut down South Carolina's offense. And this is a game where it's for the state championship of South Carolina, Dabo Sweeney says. And they've put in great care into this one each year. So I do like Clemson minus the points at home. I don't see that whatever happened last week with South Carolina's offense happening again in Death Valley against that defense.
A Clemson win would give them the series record 8 straight wins in the Palmetto Bowl. According to your magazine, Phil, they hadn't given up a touchdown to South Carolina since 2018. I think that streak might come to an end based on the 60 burger we up against Tennessee. Spencer Rattler, 6 TDs in that game. Oh, my goodness. But, 111 straight times these two played before COVID, too. So, South Carolina and Clemson getting together. Let's move to the afternoon, the delightful palette that we have in the middle portion of the day, and it begins with the Iron Bowl. Auburn at Alabama. The Crimson Tide play a lot better at home. They're given 21.5 points. 49.5 is the total, 330. Again, there's the thought that Lane Kiffin is going to be the next head coach at Auburn, but they've got a guy in Cadillac Williams that has this team believing right now. Can they keep it inside the number in the Iron Bowl on Saturday, Phil?
Yeah, and this is one where if I'm going to wager on this one, I would probably lean with Cadillac in the way Auburn's playing. Rivalry dog, playing great. And when you look at Bama, they are much better at home. They blow teams out at home, no doubt about it. And they're looking for a good game. And they don't have anything to look for. Normally, they've got the SEC championship game coming up on deck. But it is a great rivalry dog in Auburn, playing with a lot of enthusiasm. They do have a good defense. I think they can slow down the Alabama rush game. You look at how Auburn's played rush defense the last 3 weeks. They've given up 13, 94, and 85 yards. So they really are holding teams down defensively. And I think that they probably generate enough offensively to keep it within the number. I think Auburn makes a game of it. So I'm going to take the points in this one.
All right, we got another afternoon kick in Lexington with the Governor's Cup. Louisville on the road at Kentucky. Right now, the Wildcats a 2.5-point favorite, and the total at 43.5. Can you believe this Louisville team that we've seen the last few weeks? They started 2-3 this year. They lost to Boston College by a point back several weeks ago. Different team right now, and they think maybe Malik Cunningham is going to be able to play. They're saying they're optimistic that he'll be back. Kentucky can't seem to keep their quarterback upright. That's been something we've said, I feel like, every week on this show. But not really sure. Maybe it's a field goal game, but I like the under a little bit here, Phil. What's your read on that?
Yeah, I would think the under in any Kentucky game fits well because let's face it, Kentucky does have a very good defense. They're holding opponents to 91 yards per game below their season average, which is number 8 in the country. And offensively, this is not last year's Kentucky team. Their offensive line was hit hard by graduation over the offseason, and they just haven't been able to run the football like they have in the past. They're only averaging 3.3 yards per carry and giving up 41 sacks this year. When they drop back to pass, they get sacked 14% of the time. And the negative here is they're taking on a Louisville team that gets after the quarterback. They got 39 sacks this year, 12% of the time. Now, the matchup that you'd like if you're a Kentucky fan is that bigger offensive line against a smaller defensive front. We've seen it the last 4 years in this series. Kentucky's run the ball down Louisville's throat, but that's what Louisville has preached all off season. So if Louisville's got anything going, they're going to talk about the fact that they've had the ball run down their throat the last 4 years. We got to stop that. And I don't think Kentucky's run game is capable of doing what they've done in the past years. So if Cunningham comes back, that'd be great for Louisville. And remember last year, Stoops really parlayed the fact that they were an underdog in that game. Well, he's favored now, so he can't use that kind of emotion. I think Louisville's got a chance at the upset here, even with the fact that Kentucky has run the ball so effectively on them in past years.
Governor's Cup, Commonwealth Cup, Battle of the Bluegrass. Again, I've seen it all between those two. The over-ask 7 between those two. It's sitting at, I think it was 43 last check. Yeah, 43 for Louisville and Kentucky, 3 o'clock on Saturday. Let's go to Wallace Wade Stadium, and I'm going back to the well, Phil. Duke has lost 4 games by a combined 16 points. 16 points. They're catching 3.5 at home against Wake Forest. The last time the Demon Deacons were in Durham at Wallace Wade, they destroyed them 59-7. Now, I know that was when David Cutcliffe was the head coach, and Duke was actually still respectable back in 2018, but I'd be surprised if that's still not a talking point for a guy like Mike Elko in terms of the pride, the trajectory of this program, where they were and where they're going. And if Wake Forest had lost last week at home against Syracuse, I'd feel different about this. But because Wake is coming off of a win, I'm all over Duke catching 3.5. They didn't let me down as an underdog against Northwestern, Kansas, or Miami. So I'm 3-0 picking Duke as an underdog. I'm picking them again. Can they be perfect against Wake on Saturday?
I like it, Kyle. I like it. Good pick there. I do think Wake is a better team, but it is the final home game for Duke. They're at home, and as you mentioned, they have played every single team tough. Even last week against Pitt, sort of a miracle cover at the end made Scott Van Pelt's bad beats. The Pitt punter dropping a snap, them scoring a touchdown on 4th and 19 to all of a sudden only lose the game by 2. But once again, they played a good game. They actually outgained Pitt 353-310. They've run the football well. Riley Leonard has been a revelation this year, 16-5 ratio. And Wake came into this year with much higher expectations at this point. And now after coming off that win, they've got 7 wins on the season. I think Duke's the more fired up football team here. So I would agree with you. I like Duke plus the points.
That's what I love to hear. Thank you, Phil.
All right, let's jump over to the Big 12. TCU, 1 hurdle left in the regular season. They're laying 9.5 at home against an Iowa State team that has good defense, not so much on offense. The total 47.5. Iowa State does have a 3-game win streak in this series. Like we said, they play good defense. Maybe you could lean Iowa State in a lower scoring game. TCU's a little banged up, so we're going to see just how many lives do they have. But do you think their luck runs out here, Phil, or do the Horned Frogs get one step closer to the playoff?
Well, I'm going to pick TCU to win the game straight up every week. Their high wire act continues, running the field goal team on at the last minute and making the field goal and beating Baylor. You got to figure they win the game. But here's an interesting thing to take a look at, and it's conference play. Now, naturally, you look at the record here. Iowa State is 1-7 in conference play, and TCU is 8-0. So TCU's a lot better team, right? Well, look at this right here. This is your yards per game in conference play. TCU is plus 78 yards. Respectable, not great. You're a team 8-0. You probably should be about plus 120, 130, but plus 78 is good. Iowa State now at 1-7, they've got to be what, minus 80, minus 90 yards per game? No, plus 64 yards per game. They're almost identical. Iowa State's outgaining Big 12 foes by 64 yards per game. TCU by 14 yards more at 78 yards per game. It's right here, this defense. They have the number one defense in the country, holding opponents to 156 yards per game below their season average. They play great D. And remember, if you go back and take a look at this Texas game, look what the score was at the half against the Texas defense. They had 68 yards and 3 points. In fact, the fourth quarter was huge for TCU in pulling out that 7-point win. They're laying double digits here. I think Iowa State's defense can do what Texas's defense did and slow them down. And I think Iowa State clearly stays in the game. I'll call for Iowa State to be leading in the fourth quarter, and somehow, some way at the end of the game, you look at the scoreboard, TCU's got more points, but not more than 10 points more than Iowa State. I'm taking the Cyclones to cover.
Boot Corrigan did say on the college football playoff selection ranking show, reveal, whatever it is, the quote was, TCU has done a great job of finding ways to win games. Yeah, I think that's underselling it. It is just remarkable, unreal the way they have been able to pull it out of the hat each and every week. TCU trying to preserve that perfect season. It will be the subject of college football Saturday night, late afternoon game. I'm thankful for that. My final football broadcast of the year in studio, Sloan Martin and Mike Golick Jr. I think that's a 4 o'clock. Yeah, 4 o'clock start on the Varsity Network app. Download it if you haven't already. College basketball is up and running in full swing for Feast Week, so you can find some hoops. And certainly all the college football games, most of them, both sides, all the hometown radio calls on the Varsity Network app. So be sure to download that app. Oregon and Oregon State, final game before we get to the night slate. And, man, are we moving through them here on the Week 13 edition of the Phil Steele Show. Phil, I know in your household and my household, we're still calling it the Civil War, so that's good. We're on the same page. Oregon and Oregon State. The Beavers have won 2 of 3 at home in this rivalry. It's the 5th longest rivalry in college football. 3:30 start on ABC. The Beavs are catching 358 is the total. Oregon wins. They're in the Pac-12 title game in Vegas, taking on USC.
Yeah, and I think Oregon is the better team. When you look at them, they can run the football. It was good to see Bo Nix come back. Our buddy Wayne Cook on the podcast was telling us Bo Nix wasn't going to play, and then Bo goes and plays last week, and they get the big win over Utah. So a big win there for Oregon, getting him back. And I think he'll be healthier this week with another week off the injury. So, Oregon's a very good team and the better team. But Oregon State is a great story at home. I mean, they're 11-1 straight up at home the last 2 years, 12-0 against the spread. Their lone loss was to that USC team that Oregon probably plays next week, and they only lost that game by 3 points. So it's a very scrappy Beavers team. I love it when they get the chainsaw working at home on third down. Always a lot of fun there, and I think it's going to be a great game. So I call it the Civil War. I think it's going to be worthy of the Civil War. I think it's going to come right down to a coin flip at the end. I'm going to call for Oregon to come away with the win. If you're betting the game, probably take the 3 points with Oregon State at home, because I feel worst case scenario, you get a push off the deal.
Has become a tough place to play, really, and Corvallis for sure. The Bo Nix experience, the total experience, even when Wayne Cook gets a text that he's not playing, he does play. Does that surprise anyone? It's Wayne Cook feeding people information, which certainly should always be taken with a grain of salt. Let's move to the evening. Notre Dame and USC. Given my love affair with the Fighting Irish, this is my favorite trophy, the Battle for the Jeweled Shillelagh. Love this. The Coliseum is going to be the site for the Fighting Irish and the Trojans of Southern Cal. I'm trying to give you the updated rankings between these two. USC 6th behind LSU. Already mentioned that, but Notre Dame is up to number 15 and 8-3 in the year. This is the game for Notre Dame. In my own Fighting Irish circles, even talking with Mike Golick Jr. last week, a couple of weeks ago, when I was eating 3 pounds of pancakes in Raleigh when we met together for breakfast, this was the game circled. Look, Notre Dame just needs to take care of business, and they're going to ruin USC's season. Maybe not necessarily Caleb Williams' Heisman hopes, as he accounted for 503 total yards in that win over UCLA, but I love the spot for the Irish. They've won 4 straight in the series, and this could make all those ills go away of losing to Marshall, of losing to Stanford for Notre Dame, if they can finish the job and knock off USC and take them out of the playoff picture on Saturday night.
Yeah, Notre Dame's playing great football right now. In fact, if you look at the last 4 weeks average game grade, Notre Dame's playing at 113.8 level. USC just 108.6. So that would favor Notre Dame to win the game. My favorite play here, Kyle, is probably the under. And the reason for that is, as you recall, when Notre Dame played Ohio State, their philosophy was let's run the football, which I believe you can against USC. They should be able to run the football and take up the clock. Also, the defense just played back. They let Ohio State get some shorter passes in front of them, but they weren't going to get beat deep. Final score there, 21-10. The toughest defense in the Pac-12 is probably Oregon State. And Oregon State, that final score, 17-14. So we can see the teams, if you can run the football and you play good defense, you can slow down USC and not have one of these 48-45. And as you talked about, two drunk guys in a bar just throwing punches at each other, 48-45 game. So I like the under in this one. It's in the 60s. I do think Notre Dame will score some points. USC score some points, but I do think Notre Dame shrinks the clock and takes this game under. Now, USC is the stronger team. Caleb Williams is the better, naturally the best quarterback on the field for this one, but Notre Dame's the perfect matchup. They've got the defense, the run game. So I think it's going to be a great game. I'm leaning with the under as my favorite play in this one.
Total is 64.5. Trojans favored by 5.5, 7:30 on ABC. I'm just happy I'm going to be able to see most of that as, again, I should be off the air by 7:30, 8 o'clock. So it's going to be a fun Saturday evening for your boy. Trip.
All right, back to the SEC. We've got a 7 o'clock kick in College Station. LSU on the road at Texas A&M. Right now the Tigers laying 9.5. And boy, does that 46.5. That under looks a lot better all of a sudden after what happened last week. A&M just not able to score on UMass. I mean, that was
my Sickos pick. That was the third Sickos loss of the year. Come on.
You had a couple questionable ones there last week, Kyle.
It was my worst week, sorry.
But that's okay. LSU, they've still got playoff hopes very much alive right now. I don't think the 12th man's going to be enough on Saturday, Phil. I think they might need more like 15 or 16 men to beat LSU. What do you think?
I agree with you 100%. I think when you look at LSU coming into this one, they need a win. They're not looking ahead to the SEC championship game. They realize if they lose this game, their hopes of getting to the playoff, which are somewhat slim right now. I mean, you still have to beat Georgia, but would be gone. And A&M has just not been impressive. I mean, their offense has struggled. You wonder how long a chain is going to play in this game. The quarterbacks, they're down to Wegman, and it's been a tough thing to watch. A&M and LSU, much like Florida State, has been playing their best ball these last 4 weeks. They're playing to an average game grade of 117.6, outgaining opponents by 85 yards per game. And they're just playing great football. So I think LSU's on the ascension. Texas A&M is going down, and I'm surprised the number's only 9.5. I realize College Station is tough, but I can't imagine College Station being tough for a team that's just 4-7 right now. So I like LSU minus the points.
Brian Kelly 0-2 against Jimbo Fisher all time. Both of those losses by 4 points each, as Phil's magazine reminds you of when Jimbo was with Florida State. Sunflower Showdown, Kansas and Kansas State. Wildcats are favored by 12, 62.5 the total, 8 o'clock on Fox. Now, some good vibes for a KU team that started the year 5-0 and have been 1-5 since. Again, they were in the rankings. They hosted College Game Day, and just on Tuesday, they extend Lance Leopold through the 2029 season. The second extension he's gotten already this year. The first came back on September 1st. 120th edition of this. In spite of all of that, Phil, for Lance Leopold and this Kansas Jayhawk team, I don't think there's any slowing down Kansas State with a potential conference championship game looming, but K-State has to win the ball game. So I like the Wildcats laying 12.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with you there, Kyle. And this is one where all you have to do, and the good thing about Phil Steele Plus is you can see with the red where teams have a weakness. And what does this look like Kansas's weakness is? Oh, it's rush defense. In fact, in the Big 12, they're giving up 241 yards per game. The last 4 weeks, 329 yards per game on the ground, 6.4 yards per carry. What does Kansas State like to do? Oh, they like to run the football. Deuce Vaughn, Adrian Martinez, Will Howard, whoever the quarterback is, they like to run the football, so I think they will have success doing what they want to do. Kansas State has a much better defense, holding opponents to 58 yards per game below their season average. Kansas allows 64 above. Kansas was non-competitive against Texas. Even the Baylor game, they only lost that game by 12, But if you watched it, it could have been a lot worse than that. The Texas Tech game, they lost by 15. So they have been starting to lose to the big boys. And I love the Kansas State matchup with that run game. So I do like K-State minus the points over Kansas. And if you take a look at this rivalry, we've got the last 25 years on Phil Steele Plus. The green here means you win the game straight up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. This is something that dates back to the 80s when Bill Snyder started there. They just dominate Kansas almost every year. Kansas has very few wins over here in the spread column. I like Kansas State minus the points.
Took the words right out of my mouth there, Phil. Yeah, they've been dominant in that series, and I would lean K-State as well in that one. Now we'll bounce it back to the ACC and old Big East matchup here. Pitt on the road at Miami. These teams, neither one of them seem to be able to find a way to cover a game. I think if they can find a way not to cover, they will. But somebody's got to do it in this game because it's sitting at 6.5 right now. Bowl eligibility on the line for the U, and they're at home. I don't know. Is that enough to give you a lean on this one, Phil? What do you like here?
Yeah, Pat Narduzzi on the road. I mean, the guy's 13-3 against the spread on the road, and here they are on the road with the better team. I mean, Miami is a team that had 7 yards at the end of the first half against Clemson, so that game probably wasn't even as close as the 40-10 final score would indicate. Meanwhile, with Pitt, as I mentioned, what a tough non-cover last week. I had Pitt against Duke in that game, and I thought the game was over, and then they punt and a bad snap on the punt. They recover it. And on 4th and 19, all you need is an incomplete pass and Pitt's covering. And they throw a touchdown pass. And it's a 2-point loss. And it makes the Scott Van Pelt's bad beat. So tough loss last week. But they did go into Virginia and win 37-7. They've had to have some big wins on the road. I think Pitt's got the much better defense this year. Better offense. Israel Abanikanda is one of the best running backs in the country, and I think he will have success against Miami of Florida defense, giving up 4.1 yards per game in ACC play. So I like Pitt to go on the road and get the win there.
So when you make terrible decisions, low-quality life decisions, and you're playing from behind, we've got to catch up late at night on Saturday. And trust me, during Thanksgiving week, there's been a lot of bad decisions, right? Beginning probably on Wednesday night, Black Wednesday. Ahead of Black Friday, you've got Thursday with the Egg Bowl even, all the tryptophan that you're going to be laced with and just fuming over. And all of a sudden, it's 10:30 at night on Saturday, and they call it the Apple Cup that you're going to continue to wet your beak with. So Washington is favored by 2 over Washington State. 61 is the total, 10:30 game. Phil, we had a no-sweat cover for Fresno at Nevada last week when we were trying to chase down some winners. Utah let us down. Hawaii won outright as a double-digit dog. We'll start with Washington. Do we lay the 2 against Washington State in this Apple Cup rivalry? Washington has won 10 of 12. They're 9-3 against the spread against their rivals from the Palouse.
Yeah, when we get to these late night ones, I usually circle one that I like out of the bunch, and this is the one that I like out of the bunch. It's Washington. And here's the thing. In the Pac-12, I'm going to say there's an upper echelon of teams and a lower echelon. And earlier this year, when Washington opened up 4-0, I thought upper echelon. But then they lost to UCLA and lost badly. They were down 40-16, then lost to Arizona State the next week, didn't play well against Arizona, didn't play well against Cal. And I'm thinking, I am not going to put Washington in there. But then they beat Oregon State, which is an upper echelon team. They beat Oregon on the road, an upper echelon team. And they do indeed belong, much like I thought at the very start of the year. So I think you're 6 teams in the Pac-12 that belong in the upper echelon: USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, Oregon State, and Utah. Now, if you look at how Washington State has fared against the best teams in the Pac-12, they lost to Oregon at home by 3. They lost to USC on the road by 16. They lost to Oregon State by 14, and they lost to Utah by 4. They're a perfect 0-4 against the better teams in the Pac-12. They've sort of been doing it with smoke and mirrors this year. They weren't as close as the final score to indicate against Oregon. Against Wisconsin, they were out first down 22-10. Meanwhile, Michael Penix might be the best and lead the nation in passing at the end of the year this year. He's having a great year. The weather forecast is manageable, 33 degrees, no precipitation. So I think the passing game will be alive here, and they're playing with some real legitimate revenge. Last year, Washington team that was just trying to get the season over with, interim head coach, all that stuff, got blown out 40-13. This is a series Washington's always dominated. I like Washington minus the 2 in this one on the road.
All right, and the nightcap on Saturday, we've got BYU on the road at Stanford. The Cougars a 6.5-point favorite, the total at 57.5. Both these teams have been terrible against the spread all year. But look, I don't know if you know about this. In missionary lore, there's never been a matchup like this. Both of these guys, former Latter-day Saint missionaries, Tanner McKee and Jaron Hall. Both quarterbacks are juniors. They're both married. They're both thinking about going pro. Are they going to come back? I mean, this is for all the marbles in the missionary quarterback community. What do you like here, Phil?
I don't like much in this game because I like Stanford last week against Cal and thought we were sitting pretty at 20-6 in the fourth quarter, and then Cal goes and scores off of those fumble returns, interception returns. Stanford's down to a safety at the running back spot in Legber, and he's average at best. And they do have a good quarterback in Tanner McKee, and they're at home. BYU has been a team that opened up great at 4-1, but then they lost 4 in a row. They did beat Boise. That was a great game, but then struggled against Utah Tech. So I'm not wild about either of these two teams here. Stanford's at home. Maybe BYU winning the game by 5 or 6. Take the points, but if you're betting this one late at night, maybe Gamblers Anonymous might be your call.
Phil, that's one of my picks. Come on, that's a tease. Part of my top 3 power plays.
Sorry about that, Kyle.
No, it's good. I'm gonna look. I welcome it. You give us your 3 power plays because you went 2-1 last week. Very sneaky selection with Utah State over San Jose State. I got to give you credit there. I'm actually thinking about playing the Aggies this week, catching 16.5 at Boise State. Again, a team maybe looking ahead to the Mountain West title game. But for you, 2-1, Utah State over San Jose State, and Auburn covered against Western Kentucky. What do you like most this week, Phil?
Well, 2 of the games we talked about already, which were Kansas State over Kansas, would be, one of my best bets. And then the other one would be Washington over Washington State. And then let's go off the radar a little bit. A game that nobody's really looking at, and it's UTSA's at home against UTEP. UTSA's been blowing teams out. Been great. But last year, UTSA had an undefeated season. They were 11-0, and they had the CUSA title game coming up on deck. And what did their coach, Jeff Traylor, do? He rested their quarterback, rested a bunch of players, and they got beat by North Texas on the road, 45-23. Well, he's not protecting an undefeated season this year. His team's undefeated in CUSA, but they've got 2 losses, Houston and Texas, so really nothing to protect. You've got the big CUSA game, title game on deck, which will be at home. It's a huge game. So why not rest your players like last time? And UTEP's a gutsy team. And even if Hardison's out, Brownholtz played well last week in their dominating win over FIU. This is a UTEP team that's been very scrappy in all their games. I'm taking UTEP plus the 17 over UTSA as the 3rd play.
UTSA gave me my only win last week with the team total over 36. I felt like I was cheating kind of by not taking a side or an over-under, but still, they blew out Rice. So you're right. So going with the Miners. All right, there's Phil's 3 picks. I'm going to go with, I came in with a much better game plan this week, Phil. I felt so torn a week ago, and it came back to bite me as I was trying to furiously take notes during our show during week 12. So I came in with more conviction. There's just more delightful, more appetizing selections, which is fitting, given it's rivalry weekend and it's Thanksgiving. So a couple that I've already got down on the dock, I'm going to go against. I'm not going to go with Utah State plus 16.5. I'm not going to go with Arkansas minus 3. I felt like that should be punishment for going against them and taking Ole Miss 2.5 to lay against Arkansas last week when the Hogs led 42-6 in that game when going away. Thought about Ole Miss even in the Egg Bowl after 464 rushing yards against Arkansas, and you lose the way that you did. You're going to come back in a big way and bounce back against the Bulldogs, but I just can't put any money on the Egg Bowl, at least not yet. Get a few brown water drinks in me on Thursday night. That might change. Coastal Carolina, we did not talk about them. The number has grown from 13.5 to 14. They're underdogs at JMU. I feel like that's just too big of a number for Coastal Carolina. I know they don't have Grayson McCall, but I'm going to take the shots as an underdog at JMU. Saturday, 12 o'clock game on ESPNU. My other 2, Duke 3.5. We already talked about the reasons why. At home against Wake Forest, and then BYU. Simply, this is a team that rose to number 12 in the polls before losing to Oregon. they're better than what their 6-5 record shows. Kalani Sitake is going to have these guys ready to play on the farm. They're 0-2 all time against Stanford. Kind of a weird, awkward matchup. Tripp gave us the missionary history. I appreciate that. The Cards are 1-5 though against the spread. Plus, what do they have to play for, especially after losing the way that they did against Cal last week? So I think BYU is going to be more inspired as a 6.5 points favorite. So I like them to cover that on the road. Those are my three. Tripp, what do you got teed up for us on the teaser this week?
Yeah, last week it got shattered in the first game of the day on Saturday. UCF I think everybody here liked UCF last week.
Yeah.
And then Navy, just out of nowhere, ruined the teaser. The other three games hit like always, but still, it was a loser. A loser's a loser. This week, I've got a 6-point teaser. My first team is Tulane. I'll get to the Green Wave +7 on the road at Cincinnati. I think there's a chance they could win that game. I like Florida State. I think they could cover the 9.5. I'm going to tease them. It's going to be down to, it looks like my book must have had them at 10 because now Florida State would need to cover 4 against Florida. Phil, it's like you were walking around inside my brain on that UTEP piece there. I've got UTEP in 23 on the road at UTSA. And then I mentioned earlier, I like the under for Louisville, Kentucky. And if we tease that, we get it at 49.
Nice. What are you drinking over there, Cal?
This is just some water. Just some water. So after this show, I might be switching over to something else. So Christmas tree today. So and finalize our plans for what we're eating tomorrow, at least what we're bringing. But before we get out, the Sickos are now 10-3 again. Texas A&M somehow disgustingly. And I knew it would go this way. That's why I clumped it and characterized it as a Sickos pick. You get UMass and College Station. You're Texas A&M. You've lost 6 in a row. You've been terrible. You've been god-awful. And you can't even cover 33.5 against UMass. So I deserved it. I feel like I should repent by involving UMass again this week and also having to take an under since I took the over in Minnesota, Iowa and lost that one last week. So I'm going to go with under 45 for Army and UMass. Let's put the Minutemen back on the board, and I'm putting an Army team on the board and taking the under despite their totals going over in 4 of their last 5 games. So I'm just at odds with my mind, and I'm just trying to get as gross and disgusting as I can on the turkey table this week. So give me the under for Army and UMass. Phil, it's been an absolute blast. You enjoy Thanksgiving. I know you're going to have your preview for Phil Steele Plus. Again, philsteele.com, at philsteele042 on Twitter. We can get that Thursday morning, correct? Thanksgiving morning.
Yep.
For a preview of Phil Steele Plus.
Yeah, it'll be up Thursday morning. Will be the Phil Steele Plus tour with selections. I've been giving out about 11 free plays every Friday morning, but it'll be Thursday morning this week.
And also special shout out to Stephen Hartzell, if I heard correctly.
That's right.
Based on your podcast that I was listening to with Wayno and Hartzell this morning in preparation for this show. So there will be a special Stephen Hartzell play. You can listen to everything from College Sports Now for the audio OGs on the podcast feed, beginning with Roddy Jones this week, Wayne Cook, Michael Felder, and Tripp will be back later in the week. And, of course, as always, the Phil Steele Show. Just one more of these coming up next week and live, as always, at CS Now Tweets, 1 o'clock on Thursday. So one more show, Phil. Thank you so much. Follow him at PhilSteele042, Tripp Hurd at Tripp Hurd. I'm at Kyle Shass. Happy Turkey Day to everyone. Be thankful. And please, please, bet wisely. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.